Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, and you're listening to Bob Nolly and the Labrador Leadership Podcast. You must be prepared to ignite.
We're on fire.
Live from the RVA, this is the Labrador Leadership Podcast with Dr. Bob Nolly. The program that brings you the leadership skills that can make you the most authentic, approachable leader for the sake of your business, your team, and for you. Now, here's Bob.
Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Welcome back. Come on up here and have a seat. You found the Labrador Leadership Podcast. It's Dr. Bob Nolly. And welcome to the program. Today, it's just you and me. And that's a good thing, yeah? Yeah, sure. Alex will be back next week. We have a special interview guest as well coming up. But I wanted to stick with a thread we have underway here. In the last show, we talked about leadership within the context of project management. We talked about Tim Barry's article on the top leadership qualities of a project manager. And I'll run down the list quickly here. Inspiring a shared vision, a good communicator, integrity, enthusiasm, empathy. That's halfway if we're counting. That's 5. Number 6, competence, the ability to delegate tasks, cool under pressure, team building skills, and finally, problem-solving skills. And I talked about each of these in the last show, but one I sort of fell into a little bit was a good communicator. And I felt that was worthy of going a little bit more in depth in, and we will do that today. And if you're not in a project management role, I would argue, number one, well, in some ways you are. If you're not in a formal project management role, there are times when you're in project management-like activities. And even if you are not, just gaining a perspective on what the role of a PM is like and just how you can improve communication in that context may be helpful to us all as leaders. So let's take a look here at communication skills for effective project leaders. I found this piece in CIO magazine by Mariah Alexander, and we will link this up as we always do. And listen as we go through this list to how the communication skills that she says are needed for effective project managers are very similar to what we call the effective skills in leadership. For example, at the top of her list, number 1 is trustworthiness. Sure, most people want to work and do business with leaders they trust, and that's one of the most important qualities. So that's at the top of the list. Transparency. That aligns with trust. Strong leaders want to be transparent in their communications. And as we've said before, transparency is linked to authenticity. You want the people that you work with, either formally on your team or on your project team, with a kind of matrix relationship, you want them to trust not only what you say, what falls out of your mouth, but what you mean. No need to read between the lines, no hidden agendas. That's what transparency is all about. And in a project management role, the team really looks to someone with focus. And in this particular context, you have to be able to focus to effectively lead. You can't be keeping multiple balls in the air. Now, within the context of the project, you certainly can be doing that. But if there's something else outside of the scope of the project that is attracting a good amount of your attention, it's really going to impact your ability to effectively lead a project. Because projects don't go as planned. And that's why they require your focus. And aligned with this is your stability. That focus will also give you a sense of stability that can be observed. And if your team sees you maintaining that focus, they will feel a greater sense of stability and be able to build more initiative toward the completion of the project. That's a great point she makes here, the importance of focus and stability here. In your problem-solving skills, one of those top 10 skills we read in the previous show, there's also an issue with objectivity and fairness. Now, the bigger, the more complex a project is for an organization, the more risk there are. The more complex project, the larger the project, the more risk there are. Not only to the stakeholders in terms of completion of the project, but to the team dynamics. Because when the stakeholders or the objectives of a division clash with what the team's trying to do, all of a sudden the objectivity, the fairness that leaders use to their advantage, they start to break down. Leaders that are at the top of their game are very inclusive in their communications. And they really want to try to overcome these differences that comes out of clashes such as these. So in a project management role, a leader there has to listen without bias. And if there is a conflict, they have to work effectively with many iterations of communication with all the key stakeholders to get the ideas prioritized. And even in an agile environment, that's what a Scrum Master does. Okay, the next point, confidence. Well, we talked about confidence as a project management, a skill. In communication, it certainly makes sense. And there's a point here that's worth mentioning. People that work with project managers from above, like stakeholders and execs, they want project leaders that are confident in their knowledge. Remember the point of competence that we brought up earlier. And in their own abilities, but they don't want people that are arrogant. Now, there's a difference between the two here. Mariah points out, arrogance makes team members uncomfortable. Arrogance makes them reluctant, especially when there's a need to share ideas and share differing opinions. Confidence, on the other hand, pushes a team toward working toward shared goals. So there's no place for arrogance there. Confidence is one thing. Arrogance is a total other thing. Next, the best leaders lead by example. Sure, they make every effort to walk the walk as they talk the talk. And that gets your team members more participative when you lead by example. Physically, this is how we act. And they do so with a high level of energy and motivation. That negative attitude cannot come into play here. Once again, who wants to work with somebody that's a real pessimist? Negative, not really engaged. And there are going to be opportunities for project managers to start thinking that way. Schedules start to break down. Things don't go as planned. It would be very easy for a leader's disposition to change in that point. But how well they can motivate themselves and keep them team motivated with a high level of energy, that makes all the difference in the world. And it can influence how well you get buy-in where you need it at all levels of the organization. Next point, consistency and flexibility. Consistency in the decisions. Flip-flopping, that's not a good thing. We talked about project leaders being reliable and consistent with communication quality and style. You still got to have some flexibility to adapt to your audience. But good PMs establish themselves as reliable communicators because you don't want your team surprised in the words that fall out of your mouth. You don't want them surprised by your tone. You want to be able to flex in the message, but you want to be consistent in your tone and delivery. From the other side of the table, people also want accessibility. You can't be. There is no way you can be an effective leader in a project management context if you're inaccessible to your team. They have to know they can get to you. Stakeholders have to know they can get to you pretty easily without going through hoops, without running into any gatekeepers. If you're an effective PM, you are never putting up walls. You're never closed off. 2 more points to wrap this up. Clarity. Great PMs make their communication methods, their mediums, and their styles the most appropriate ones they could choose for their audience. And they have this ability, and this falls under the problem-solving skills we talked about in the last show. They have the ability to take something that's really complex and make it simple, what I call accessible, so that audiences at different levels of understanding, at different technical levels perhaps, can understand that. Being simple is not simple. That's a quote from Mark Grimm. Being simple is not simple. A leader's top communication quality is the ability to paint a clear picture of the group's true purpose. So clarity, it would be very easy to slough that off and think, oh, of course, clarity. It goes without saying. It's not easy. You really have to gear your communication method styles toward the audience and the situation. So what are we missing from this list? One big thing, and the last thing we mentioned here, respect. Respect for the entire team, overcoming culture, age, gender, experience, education, all of the diversity points, even overcoming the preferences that each team member can have for certain types of communication. Email is better for me. Just text me, call me, whatever the preferences are. You respect all of those things. And when you communicate in all of those ways, it is still clear and it's still concise. And it is both of those things while you are still demonstrating respect. Respect for what? Respect for what everyone else is doing, for their opinions, for their gifts, for their contributions. And when you infuse that respect into the project, that's the key to maintaining positive working relationships. That's a pretty big list. And Mariah Alexander came up with a great one here. Let's run them down one more. Trustworthiness, transparency, focus and stability, objectivity and fairness, confidence, leading by example, energy and motivation, consistency and flexibility, accessibility, clarity, and respect. Now, just as I read those right now, they tend to transcend communication and just be talking about the core concepts of leadership we've talked about since we started here. But if you apply them just within the context of communication, I think some powerful results can ensue. A lot to think about, huh? Okay, on our next show, we will wrap up our little soiree into the field of project management. Perhaps we'll return to that further down the road, but we'll talk about this one more time. And we'll hope you'll join us then. Okay, folks, take care of one another. We'll see you.
Thanks for listening to the Labrador Leadership Podcast. For the sake of all the special people in your life that deserve you to be the best leader you can be. Connect with us on our website at LabradorLeadership.com, on Facebook at Labrador Leadership, and on Twitter at Lab Leadership. Now, here's a final thought from Bob.
Communication skills of the best project managers exhibit trustworthiness, transparency, clarity, and respect. And every time when I ask you to take care of one another, respect is at the core of that. Come see us at LabradorLeadership.com and click on the big orange button to join the conversation. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.